Welcome to the Divergent AF podcast. I'm your host, Selena Thompson, a late diagnosed ADHD mother on a hashtag journey to unapologetic authenticity. Dive into the rabbit hole realness with me as we overshare unfiltered and relatable stories of what neurodivergent life is really like. Lifting the lid on the honest, hilarious, and heartbreaking topics typically confined to our inner monologue. Get ready to feel seen and heard as we ditch the to-do list, the daily planners, but most importantly, the shame.
Welcome back to the Divergent AF podcast. I'm your host, Selena Thompson. This is episode 8. I had a week off last week. I got a severe case of COVID, but I'm back and I'm sorry that I had to miss last week. Most people would probably have a few episodes under their belt and they would be ahead, but this is ADHD and I am not ahead. I live my life a quarter mile or an episode at a time, as you will. So for today's solo episode, I thought I would jump in with kind of a part 2 of my diagnosis story, as you will. I covered it firstly in episode 5, What Do You Mean I Have ADHD? And I did briefly touch on a period or an experience where I went off meds cold turkey, or as I was advised to. And I said I would leave that tragic story to a later date, and the later date is here. It is now. So buckle up, because I look back at this experience, and again, it is something my therapist told me, that my life is like Alice in Wonderland, and maybe the reason I go through all these tragic series of unfortunate events is to really advocate and share them so others will not make the same mistake as me. So cue 1 year past my diagnosis. I was 1 year in. I was on quite a high dose of Ritalin, and I was also on an SSRI, which I'd been on since I was about 13. I mean, I'd gone through a lot of different antidepressants, and I had settled on sertraline. If you haven't heard of sertraline, it's an SSRI, which is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. I just know that it's a class of antidepressants because there are different classes and they work on different neurotransmitters in the brain. This is what I know. So anyway, I had been on sertraline maybe since I was 13. I mean, I'd gone through different ones and I'd tried different poisons, but that one just didn't really make me sick. It was the best I could do out there, really, notwithstanding the fact that I had undiagnosed ADHD. It was the best I could do at the time. But I was on the highest dose, which was quite normal for me. I would always hit the highest dose on anything. Things were going terrible all over again. I'd had a really good few months, and then suddenly things were just falling to pieces again, but worse. And I will say, on a side note, that there is not enough medication on the planet to make an unhappy person happy in a bad situation, looking back on it. But I think a lot of us have been conditioned to feel that it's always our fault. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. For a lot of us, we're really conditioned to take on blame, that everything must be our fault or it must be our mind. But looking back with hindsight, there was no way in hell that there would be anything that could have fixed the situation that I was in. So that's all I'll say about that. We live and we learn. My psychiatrist had made it really clear that he did not want to deal with administering my antidepressants or basically diddling with them. He just didn't want to F with my antidepressants. He wanted me to go to my GP. And that to me was really annoying, because I thought, well, you are the Ritalin god, and, the GP has to go through you. And so why can't I just go to one person, you, because you are a psychiatrist and you could just do both meds? I don't know. I don't know. Some things happen. I don't get it. Anyway, because of his reluctance to help me with the antidepressants, he just wanted to focus on the Ritalin. I was like, okay, that's fine. Well, if you want to play that, we'll do that. I'll go to my GP. And unfortunately, my regular GP that I'd had since I was 13, who's incredible, was away for months, and I couldn't see her. So this is the story of my life. So I went along to an appointment. I'd done a little bit of research on Zyban, and that was just from talking to other ADHD people about what, medication really helped them. And a lot of them had talked about Zyban. So if you haven't heard of Zyban, it's a dopamine-based medication that they typically use off the label for ADHD. But the main prescription or its main purpose is when you're trying to quit smoking. And so here's me thinking, dopamine, yes, I could always use some more dopamine, sure. This looks great. So I went along to this appointment and we just hashed out the medication that I was on. It was a good chat, and it was, sure, you can try Zyban. What you need to do is just stop taking your sertraline, and then you just take Zyban the next day. Just a little crash course on antidepressants that I learned along the way, that there's different classes, and that's really based on the different neurotransmitters that they affect in your brain. So the medications that I was switching between were not in the same class. So I don't really know the exact mechanics and the science behind it. Again, this is not a medical podcast, but you don't just stop cold turkey and just pick up a new one in a different class. Not only is it not recommended, it is damn right dangerous, and I couldn't believe it. But anyway, here we go. I was naive, I was burnt out, I didn't do the research, and I trusted blindly. Which is a pretty fucked up thing to say, that you really trust blindly in the medical profession, and again, it's your fault that you let yourself down. But anyway, we won't go there. This isn't a witch hunt. This is a tale of survival. So I went home, and that's what I did. I stopped taking sertraline one day, and the next day I just started taking Zyban. Like, what? Like, it's hard? That's what everyone does. No, it's not what everyone does at all. And I had absolutely no idea the shit show that was coming for me. I actually can't even remember those 3 months. I've lost time on those 3 months. And it's really scary. And it should never, ever have happened. But I want to share this because I hope that no one would ever get themselves in this situation. It's messed up. So I don't actually have a timeline of my symptoms. I just have a whole collection or a clusterfuck of what I went through. And I had to watch through my videos, and I wrote notes. I was scared for my life at the time. I thought that I had become a schizophrenic. I thought that I had unveiled the fact that I've had schizophrenia this whole time, and now it's unearthed itself. And what the hell have I done? I've ruined my brain, and there's kind of no coming back from it. But I was just so disconnected from reality. I didn't sleep for the first 4 nights. And if anyone knows what it's like to not sleep, even after a night or 2 nights, that's when the shadow figures creep in. I was having not only auditory but visual hallucinations. I was having pins and needles throughout my whole body. I was having what I now learnt to be called brain zaps. I would just call them electric shocks, where literally my body and my brain would just zap, almost like, when you used to jump on an old school trampoline on the springs and then you touch one of your friends and you go zap. It was like that. But at any moment, just constant ringing in my ears. I was confused. I was emotional. Emotional didn't even cover it. Tremors, absolute paranoia. And I remember at that point thinking, I need to be locked away somewhere, but then I was scared that I would never be let out again. This is how my brain thought. It actually thought, if I volunteer myself as tribute to go and be sectioned, they won't let me out again. And it was just complete, utter fucked upness, if we're honest. So, in the interest of helping myself, I remember trying to ring the doctor a couple of days later, and he was busy. And he wasn't available for an appointment until the week after. And I remember saying, this is really serious. I'm really struggling. And it was, well, if you are struggling, call 111. And I thought, well, no, they're going to lock me up and throw away the key. I can't do that. I need to talk to someone that will believe me, So then my next port of call was calling and emailing my psychiatrist. I was given a time slot, maybe within a week, and I did have to pay and send a screenshot through of my payment before the appointment. I mean, God forbid I've lost my mind, but at least I've paid my account, if you know what I mean. So anyway, I did all that, and it was a Zoom, which was quite normal. And I remember just trying to explain what had happened, and his face, he just gasped. But then he had to catch himself because he realized that this was not the person that should be getting stressed right now. But I remember his face. I remember it as clear as day. It was like, this was a big fuck up and this should not have happened. And I just burst out crying because I thought, great, this professional is sitting there being like, how the hell has this happened to her? But I'm the one living it. And thankfully, he assessed the situation. He read the room and realized I needed to be calm. And he just said, it's okay, Selena, we're going to get through this. We're going to get through this. He was then overseeing my medication on a weekly basis. And it was basically to take quetiapine, which, if you don't know what quetiapine is, it's an antipsychotic. I know that sounds so psychotic. It's a horrible way of branding it, but that's what it was. He realized that I needed to calm down. In the meantime, I also had managed to get my very first appointment with my psychotherapist. And again, this was me just trying desperately to help myself and email all these avenues. And it was really lucky that within that first month of coming off sertraline cold turkey, I had my first appointment. And I do want to say on a side note that I've tried so many different types of therapy. I really have. And again, it was, I haven't tried psychotherapy or psychoanalysis. Like, I've got nothing left to lose right now. And I turned up, and I can honestly say that this is the only therapy. I don't even like to think of it as therapy. I like to think of it as shooting the shit and making him laugh. There's no homework. There's no structure. You just go on tangents and you end up where you end up, and it's so natural. And the whole premise is to have a place of complete non-judgment. And it's amazing. But anyway, that's just my personal opinions. I'm not getting any commission from that. I am not an Avon for psychotherapy, but I love it. He just sat down and looked at me after I had told him my sad story about how I'd come to his office. And he just said to me, how many times did you try and kill yourself? You would have gone mad. Of course, this is what would have happened to you. This would have happened to anyone. You cannot take away that much medication and for this not to turn a person mad. It was just hearing this reassurance of, yeah, you've gone crazy, but it is so normal for you to be crazy in this situation and this context, and that this is what happens to the brain if you do this. And he really just sat me down and spoke to me about why I couldn't sleep, why I was seeing things, why I was hearing things, how this is just so normal. Because I had jumped off a serotonin cliff, essentially. My brain was used to having a certain level of neurotransmitters, and suddenly it was dry, and that just sent my brain into a complete kamikaze spin, and it would have done it to anyone. And that's why they say don't ever do that. I think just having someone to talk to go through that experience and just to kind of normalize that this would happen to anyone, it's not you, was just really invaluable. And he was the first professional that gave me his number and said, anytime, day or night, if you feel like you can't get out of your spiral, you call me or you message me. And have I ever done it? No, because I don't want to be a burden, obviously. But just knowing that that's there and just knowing that I'm treated like a human being gives me so much reassurance. So anyway, fast forward maybe 3 or 4 months, I rode the wave, got into the point where things had stabilized a bit, but I was still having these cyclic monthly episodes. And I remember saying, I feel like for about a week or 2 weeks, every month, I'm back in that place. I am back in that space where I can't sleep, where nothing is going to be okay, where I just can't see the light. And then suddenly, it's like the next day I wake up and everything's fine again. And it was this cycle and this pattern. I think we're really good at picking up patterns. And no one could really explain why. It wasn't until I was really starting to track and monitor the timing of it. And I realized that it was the week for my period, and that when I woke up, day of my period, it was like it never happened. It was like this bad dream. And I thought, that's really weird. And then obviously that's when I started to research, and that's when I came across PMDD. And all the symptoms and all the timing were just aligning beautifully. And I will actually put a link. There was this amazing app. It was a specific PMDD tracking app, and it gives you this sort of bar graph, which I love a bar graph. So you could see the charting of the symptoms and the timing with your hormones, and it was just all there. And anyway, I thought, okay, well, that's weird. Why would I only have PMDD now? I don't understand why this has only been triggered since I went off sertraline. I'd had this adjustment of getting through all the brain zaps and the horribleness, and now things had settled down. I typically should not be going through a serotonin withdrawal syndrome anymore, but why is this happening? And I looked at the best treatment for it, and can you guess what it was? SSRIs. So effectively, I had taken away the scaffolding around me that I'd had since I first got my period when I was 13, and exposed PMDD, which was always lurking but was kept at bay with SSRIs. So yes, another well-lived experience for me, revealing my own PMDD because of my own actions, but I also figured it out. So after discovering this, I then took my information and my data to my psychotherapist because I trusted him the most, and it was all there, and he was on board, yes, and he really liaised with my psychiatrist and my GP after that because I was traumatized and I didn't trust anyone. And then it was decided, okay, please just let's put me back on the SSRIs. I slowly went back on them, no issues. And I can proudly say I am not on the highest dose anymore, because I think going through that whole experience of just trying to find the right pill was really the second part of my journey, and realizing that it's not just medication. It was really about dealing with my narrative, my identity, how I thought I viewed myself in the world, who I thought that I needed to be. I was still masking. I was still pretending. So that really prompted that whole, I guess, jump into that area. I still go through it every month, but I like to think of it as more of a pothole than an abyss. So that to me is good enough. Just having like complete awareness of what is happening and when it's happening. So if you search up the symptoms of PMDD, it'll tell you severe mood swings, intense irritability or anger, depressed mood, hopelessness, anxiety, difficulty concentrating, brain fog, forgetfulness, fatigue, sleep problems. Basically, what I've come to realize is that PMDD just exacerbates my ADHD in the worst possible ways. I'm not at my most creative, my funniest. I am extremely sensitive, extremely emotional. I can't sleep. This happens to me every time. Night sweats, hopelessness, this feeling of no, that I cannot escape this hole. But then suddenly one day the lights come on and everything's fine. And you're like, that wasn't me, Patricia. Gosh, it's not me at all. But it happens every month and it's shit. I get more forgetful. I get slower and foggier. But I think the number one for me is RSD is at its worst. I mean, someone just has to give me a thumbs up or say okay with a full stop and they pretty much hate me and my life is over. And it's horrible. And I know it's ridiculous at the time, but it's not. It's serious. And we need to talk about this. Are you mad at me? But all jokes aside, it's actually a really horrible cycle to go through. And now that I have a lot of awareness about it, it definitely takes the edge off and I know how to handle it. I usually withdraw from society a bit more. That always helps. I'm just a bit kinder on myself because there's actually nothing that you can do or say. There's no Pinterest quote that will actually snap you out of it. So just don't bother, just don't bother. Just I have some downtime and then I'm back. If any of these symptoms or if the story just resonates with you, I'd really encourage you to just look into it more. I found that SSRIs were the glue that was keeping me together, but also just having awareness in terms of tracking, in terms of symptoms, in terms of, okay, yeah, it's just a thumbs up emoji, we will rebuild. Thanks for tuning into episode 8. I hope you found this topic useful and helpful. To be honest, it's quite a raw, sensitive one. There probably wasn't as many ha-ha funnies in here, but it's the real truth and it's horrible. And I hope that by sharing my experience, this could help someone, whether they are living it or they have lived it, and just basically getting the information out there because it is an all too common comorbidity with ADHD in women and it's shit.